Hello from Ukraine, my dear friends. You're watching Channel 24. My name is Andriy Drozd, and our guest today is Bruno Lete. He currently serves as a senior fellow at the German Marshall Fund of the United States in Brussels. Also, Mr. Lete provides analysis and advice on trends in geopolitics and on international affairs. He focuses primarily on NATO, transatlantic defense cooperation, developments in Eastern Europe and the Black Sea region, and cyber security. Mr. Lete, so happy to see you on our channel, and thank you for joining us today.
Hello, hi, thank you for having me on the show.
Good. So we will just start from some general questions. You know, before the war in Ukraine, there was a big debate between United States of America and leading European countries such as Germany and France about responsibility and leadership in defense and security in Europe. The main question was, why do we need NATO if there are no strategic enemies and opponents on the globe anymore? And Donald Trump even claimed that the United States should not pay for the European security. How has this Russian full-scale attack on Ukraine changed this debate and this approach?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, for sure, there are some countries in Western Europe that gravely miscalculated the fact that there were no adversaries anymore on the world. I mean, we see today that there's definitely adversaries, and the European structure, the European security structure that we knew, say, 1 year ago, is simply gone. So European security is at shambles. We see that Russia is back with some imperialistic aims. We see that even European security as a whole is being affected. And actually, the war in Ukraine, the effects of the war in Ukraine are even felt globally, for instance, when we talk about economics. So really, I think that today, especially here in Europe, everyone is very much aware that we do have a very, very serious security problem that has to be addressed. The security architecture that we knew is gone. And Ukraine is at the heart of this. So I think there's a real realization here now that Ukraine security is also European security, is transatlantic security. So the desire to support, to help, to assist Ukraine is definitely there.
Do we have this equal level of understanding in different parts of Europe that Ukrainian case is very important for everyone, actually? Because now we see the strong level of support for Ukraine from the Baltic states, from Poland, from other Eastern European states, actually, and countries. What about the Western Europe? Is there any gap between European countries such as Spain, France, Netherlands, other ones on the west, in the western part of Ukraine, Europe, comparing to Eastern European countries supporting Ukraine?
Mm-hmm. Look, first of all, I think everyone is in support of Ukraine. Everyone understands that Ukraine has to be at peace, and everyone understands that Russia is the problem here, not Ukraine. However, when it comes to the war in Ukraine, I would say in Europe, there's two schools of thoughts. I think you have on the one hand a club of countries that want Ukraine to win the war. And on the other hand, you have another club of countries that want peace for Ukraine. Now, those two concepts are very different, because if you do want Ukraine to win the war, that means you basically need to destroy Russian military abilities and contain Russian imperialism. Now, if you want peace for Ukraine, that's a different concept. That means at some point, it doesn't mean that Ukraine has to win the war, but that you basically need to find an understanding, a diplomatic solution where there is some sort of peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. So I think there, although everyone is in support of Ukraine, we sometimes see that the objectives, the tactics to get there is pretty different. And as you already mentioned it, you can clearly see a East-West divide in Europe, where the countries that are closest geographically from Russia are definitely in favor for Ukraine to win the war, whereas countries that are further removed from Russia might be more interested in having some sort of peace settlement.
Yeah, sure. And Russia also invested a lot of money, actually, a lot of resources in creating a chain of their agents of influence, I would say, in Europe, in the Western countries, actually. They also created a massive and very effective machine of propaganda, Russia Today and other stuffs. Does it help Russia now to provide and to promote their point of view in the Western countries? Because now we see even such influential persons as Elon Musk on Twitter, they are trying to provide their idea how the conflict between Ukraine and Russia should be solved, some peace deals, some referenda and other stuff. And we can see different competing ideas how to solve the war in Ukraine, how to end it, actually. Is Russia still effective in their approach to use propaganda in the Western countries?
Russia is very effective in its approach in that respect. As you said, Russia has invested massively for many, many years. I mean, we're talking about a decade here at least, to control narratives, communication channels in the West. We right now today in some countries in Europe, RT is banned, but RT is just one small element in a very bigger machine. We see that Russia is sponsoring political parties in Europe. Those are mostly on the far right end. And those political parties, think about the extreme right in France, extreme right in Belgium, but some others as well in Europe. They are gaining more and more popularity. Russia is also, very much active in narratives on things like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So, at some level, we really do see that Russian narratives are successful. Russia has also become much more sophisticated in its approach, whereas a few years ago, Russian propaganda was very hard edge. It was very like pro-Russia, anti-Ukraine. We see that the messaging now is much more subtle. It also addresses parallel topics such as immigration, insecurity. Europe won't have energy, will be left in the cold. So these are narratives, these are messages that Europe is being bombarded with by Russia. And the goal here is very simple. Vladimir Putin knows that European and transatlantic politics are dependent on public opinion. Government leaders owe to listen to public opinion here. That's our democracy. So if at some point public opinion would turn against Ukraine or blame Ukraine for the problems that there are here today, Vladimir Putin knows that this would have an impact for Western governments to support Ukraine. So in that respect, the Russian troll factory, the propaganda, is a long-term tool, not only to destabilize Western societies, but also to basically decrease the support for Ukraine and the benefit of Russia.
Yeah, Putin knows what would be the painful places in the minds of Europeans, and they, through the propaganda, using propaganda, they're trying to push and to use such tools to change the public opinion in different European countries. Actually, the Western Europe and European Union and all these Western civilizations is related in our minds with a high level of life, with sustainable society, with actually welfare, with everyday comfort. And what what benefits and what things Europeans would be ready to sacrifice in this fight, civilizational and strategical fight against Russia and supporting Ukraine? Does there any things that Europeans are ready to sacrifice for a short term, for a year or two, just to get this victory against Russia?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think that despite some of the economic and social problems that we have in Europe, I think even the public opinion is very much aware that Russia is at the root of everything. It's Russia that has invaded Ukraine, not the other way around. Nevertheless, energy prices
Yeah, but
here.
but that could be there could be a position, there could be a point of view that it is Ukrainian problem. It's not our problem. Russia invaded Ukraine, so let's give some weapons to Ukrainians and let them fight. And the other stuff is not our deal.
Yeah, and this is exactly my concern, that in the long term, the public opinion will turn. Look, energy prices are on the rise everywhere. Inflation is on the rise. And, people start to feel this in the pockets. This winter, there's still energy in Europe. That's not a problem. It's just a matter of paying. For instance, in 1 year from now, the next winter, where will the reserves come from? Russian gas is no longer available, and Europe is now looking for alternatives. So yeah, the pain will increase for European audience, for European publics. At this very point, there have been several polls, conducted, and some people say yes, we are willing to take some cost to this, but it's unclear how much cost people will be willing to take. We've seen, for instance, I am now based in Brussels. In Belgium, there have been manifestations on the streets for people manifesting against the high cost of life. So you do see that the dissatisfaction is increasing, and it's not even winter time. So yes, there is perhaps and some streams in politics. Populist parties are using this basically to also gain more votes, and that's indeed, as you said, my concern. If that dissatisfaction becomes too big, people will say, okay, let's try to make some sort of deal with Russia, so that our gas prices are lowering, our inflation is lowering. But of course, this is idyllic. This is just idealism. Even if there is some sort of settlements with Russia, things will not get better. This is just pure idealism.
Okay, I see that. Well, the interesting claim and announcement comes from the Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz. Actually, last week he called for European Union expansion, and he even supported the joining Ukraine and Moldova to the European Union as their membership, actually. And also, Scholz pushed for changes to bloc's unanimity principle, actually, when everyone supports every decision, every member of European Union should support every decision to be approved, actually. These ideas that Olaf Scholz have actually announced, would they strengthen, would they make European Union stronger, or probably just different? And how would what impact would they make on the European Union, on the model of this union, actually, of this organization?
No, absolutely. Look, obviously the European Union can offer some advantages to Ukraine, but Ukraine can also offer advantages to the European Union. Ukrainian membership for the EU is the best guarantee for more peace and stability in Europe. But also, from a European Union perspective, Ukraine is an important market. There's 40 million people living in Ukraine. So that means that, also from an economic perspective, Ukraine would strengthen the European Union, not weaken it. On the other hand, of course, membership for Ukraine is a complicated matter. Already now, the European Union is struggling with the current structures. The structures that we have nowadays in the EU, those are structures that were invented, let's say, 30, 40 years ago, when there were far less member states. And, we see already today that things are under tension. Having a country like Ukraine entering the EU bears some concerns in some capitals. Think, for instance, about the fact that the European Parliament would have to be reshuffled. We have 750 seats in the European Parliament. If Ukraine would join it, it means that every country would have to give up some seats in benefit for Ukraine. Think about things like money, for instance. The biggest budget of the European Union is agricultural policy. Right now, the biggest beneficiary of agricultural money is France. Now, if Ukraine would join the EU, Ukraine has a very important agricultural sector. It means that also money would have been redirected there. So we do see that some member states are concerned about Ukraine joining the European Union because we're not talking about a country like, I don't know, Latvia or Estonia,
Yeah,
which is
small country. It's a large country.
but a large country is something different, and this will reshuffle the structures within the European Union. So some countries are concerned about that. It's about political power. It's about money. But I think we need to realize that Ukraine can also offer benefits to the European Union. Ukraine will not just take; it will also give.
Yeah, that's understood. That's a very interesting point of view you just have said about. Well, another thing that this war revealed, actually, this 8 months of war in Ukraine revealed a lot of, I would say, unexpected approaches, tactical and strategical ideas about what modern warfare looks like. One of them is a massive usage of military drones, actually, in a scale that never seen before. There are some other things like tools of cyber attacks and different stuff. Now, how has the war of Russia against Ukraine actually changed the understanding of war for Europeans and for transatlantic political elites?
Well, I think it has changed dramatically. If you think in the bigger context here, only 10 years ago, NATO was busy chasing individual terrorists in Afghan mountains. And 10 years later, we are basically back in an era where NATO has to think about tanks, guns, missiles, frigates. The hard power is back. And let's be frank, NATO was totally not prepared for this. It didn't see this Russian aggression coming, and in many fronts also, NATO failed to see the invasion of Ukraine. And so, when we look at the last Madrid summit in 2021 from NATO, this was really a realization from NATO that things have to change. We see that NATO is now reinvesting in traditional warfare, as I said, the tanks, the guns, the jet fighters. Especially from a European perspective, one thing that the war in Ukraine has exposed for European countries is how limited our military stocks are. Already now, we are struggling to give weapons to Ukraine in Europe because we simply don't have the capabilities. Our supply chains are no longer efficient. Our defense industry is not producing enough. So there's a big problem here. And all of this has been exposed due to the war in Ukraine. And adapting to this new reality will take years. I'm not saying 20, 30 years, but it will take between 5 and 10 years, I think, for Europe to be back on track, to reform its defense industry, to make its supply chains more efficient, to, make sure that the military capabilities are there. That's one. And two, from a geopolitical perspective, and this is very important. Traditionally, NATO always considered the front line with Russia to be somewhere in the middle of Germany, right? This was always the consensus. That's where our troops were concentrated. But what we see right now is that the entire geopolitics of Eastern Europe has changed. Now the NATO front line is really on the border with Russia. Going from Finland to the Baltics to Poland and the Black Sea, and so we see that most equipment, most militaries are being redeployed to the east, and this is historical for NATO. It's the very first time actually that NATO goes further than Germany. So all these things are in play right now, and changes are very significant.
And the big question would be right now how to deal with Russia after the war in Ukraine. We can see that Russia is not very successful on Ukrainian battlefield right now, and step by step, the Ukrainian army starts to recapture our own territory, Ukrainian territory. now we don't. We can see what would be the result of this war this year or next year. How long would it continue, and so on. But the strategic question is on the table right now: how to deal with Russia after it all will be over. Would Russia collapse? How it would look like? What would be the borders of Russia? What do you think about that? How European countries and Western civilization, Western countries should deal with Russia after the war in Ukraine would be over?
I mean, 2 points on this. First of all, what we see, Russia's behavior today is not only dependent on Vladimir Putin. Russian imperialism is deeply entrenched in Russian psyche. Actually, when you look at 300 years of Russian history since Peter the Great's early 1700s, Russia has always, in those past 300 years, tried to expand to the West. And my concern is that even if Ukraine or when Ukraine wins the war, the question is, how do we remove this ability from Russia to keep waging war to the West? That has to change, and this is a big question: how you do this. And how to deal with Russia. I think in Europe there's also some countries that would like to see, not to burn the bridges with Russia, especially in Western Europe. Some countries think that when the war is over, Russia cannot collapse. It's too big to collapse. And the question is like, how do you balance the desire for Russia to be contained, to no longer pursue its imperialistic ambitions, to make sure Ukraine is safe, to make sure actually Europe is safe? How do you combine that with some sort of normalization of relations with Russia? Why certain countries think like that? It's because they see that whether you like it or not, Russia is a geographic neighbor. This is something you cannot change. And you must find some sort of peace architecture, some European security architecture that is efficient enough to preserve peace.
Mr. Lethe, sorry for interrupting, but Russia is our Ukrainians' neighbor too, and we are either interested in creating this neighboring strategy, how to really live in a peace conditions, in a peaceful conditions with Russia, with no danger for the next attack, about the next attack.
Look, I think the honest answer here is that right now no one really knows. I think everyone is just focused on how to win the war, first of all. I do think, again, there's a realization that Russia is not dependent only on Vladimir Putin, that even if Vladimir Putin would disappear, that doesn't mean that things will get better, perhaps even worse, who knows. So the question is indeed, right now I think there is just the focus on how do we make sure that we remove this ability of Russia to destabilize its neighbors. How you do that, that's a different question, and I don't think that's right now there's an answer to that. I mean, one document you can refer to is perhaps the NATO strategic concept. NATO, for instance, is open to a dialogue with Russia. Even though it considers Russia an adversary, it doesn't remove the possibility of dialogue. So I think, first of all, let's win this war in Ukraine. Let's make sure Ukraine wins the war, that all territories are removed. And I think then only we will truly understand how to deal with Russia afterwards.
Okay, so and probably the last question I often ask our guests, what would be your forecast? How do you see the prospects of this war till the end of this year, till the end of 2022, actually? There are 2 months or 3 months ahead, actually, and what would happen in this time frame?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm cautiously optimistic for Ukraine. I think Ukraine will have the ability to regain more and more territory. And in that respect, we need to salute and respect the bravery of the Ukrainian armed forces. This, of course, Ukraine can do if the West keeps delivering the weapons that Ukraine needs. But I do think that Ukraine will be able to regain the territories that are under Russian control, simply because of the fact that we see also that Russian logistics are collapsing. The Russian armed forces are demoralized. There's no good supply chains. So right now, I think the ball is in Ukraine's camp. Let's maximize on this trend right now, and try to regain those territories, at least for the next couple of months. And I think that Ukraine has the possibility to do so in the coming months. However, Russia will not has learned from its mistake. I think also in the past months, we see that the Kremlin is willing to throw everything that it has at it. And that, of course, is still a factor that we need to consider. A bear that is wounded is a very dangerous bear. It can still claw. But again, I do think that Ukraine will have the ability to move forward with its offensive and to regain the territories in the coming months. I do.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your point of view, and thank you for this conversation, Mr. Lethe. It was a pleasure and honor for me to have this dialogue with you today. And you are always welcome to be a guest on our channel. We hope to see you soon again. Thank you.
Дякую, and Slava Ukraine.
Heroyam Slava. Thank you so much. And thank you, our dear audience. Our guest today was Mr. Bruno Lete. He is an expert in transatlantic defense and security. And you are watching Channel 24 from Ukraine. We hope to see you soon on our channel with our new guest.